This also goes on YouTube. So just heads up, don't be picking your nose or anything.
I hope you've not had that problem with anybody.
No, I have had that problem, and I finally had to pause it. They kept going with their tea. And I'm like, yes, I'm like, I should have maybe made it really clear, but these go on YouTube, but we don't have to if you don't want to. She's like, yeah, maybe not.
Wow.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to just get you ready in here and get us going. So hi, Lissa. It is Jana, and I am here today with Evan Knox, and I'm really excited to hear his story and his message of hope. So I'm going to just count down and read it. So 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome to Oh My Health, There Is Hope. I'm your host, Jana Short, and today I'm here with Evan Knox. Evan is a founder of Caffeine Marketing and small business investor. Caffeine Marketing makes profitable marketing easy for small companies. As an investor, Evan helps small companies double and sometimes even triple their bottom line. Wow, that sounds fabulous right now during everything we're going through.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Evan. You know, we share on the podcast, we share a powerful story of hope from our personal lives. And usually that's about something that like really set you on fire. And you shared your story with hope. And I know you have several stories of hope. So you've definitely got yourself up and brushed yourself off more than once. But do you want to share that story with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the one that comes to mind really has to do with my family. I grew up in a fairly affluent area. I was an only child, so I got to really have anything I guess I asked for within reason. And as I was going into high school, my dad basically starts to struggle with a narcotics addiction that he had before my parents got married. And if we fast forward through that season a little bit, we end up pretty much losing everything. My dad, obviously, he was an entrepreneur. His company closed. He ends up going to jail. My parents get a divorce. Everything gets foreclosed on. And I remember that just being a super hard season. And there were multiple points in that I felt like, was a challenge in my personal faith with God. I really didn't see, I wouldn't say it was hopeless per se, but I was just really lonely. I struggled with that for a long time, being an only child, going through this whole thing. Like I wanted that community around me. So the hope in this is that I remember going, I guess we'll go a little bit deeper there before to the hope, but I remember going to the dentist's office, and I was probably 15 because I couldn't drive. And my mom, we pull up, whatever, and I go to the dentist, and apparently I had a cavity. And I remember crying because I had a cavity at 15, which was a little weird. But I was crying because I was worried that my mom couldn't pay for it, because my mom had just like picked up this customer service job just to try to keep us in our house a little bit longer. And I really started to get this like scarcity mindset. And so fast forward all the way through, there's obviously a lot in there in between, but I ended up getting married to this beautiful woman named Missy, which she had $100,000 in student loan debt, car debt, etc. And if you fast forward a little bit more, we tackled that together. And I had this scarcity worry thing about money back then that really was still present, and it really came back to life when I got married, because that kind of triggered that for me. And we ended up paying all of that student loan debt off within 3 years. Also during that 3 years, I was able to get a bachelor's degree within 5 months, which is pretty wild. And also start my company, which is really cool. And so it just felt like a really redemptive thing where I was able to really set my family up really well financially with this company and pay off that debt, while also trying to wrestle with that internal fear of like not having enough, and letting that thing eventually go to rest as I try to grow my company. Because I knew that if I had that scarcity mentality, if you will, I wasn't going to be able to grow a successful company. And so I'm just really thankful that I've been able to have the community around me to support me. My wife was obviously really great. So was my mom. And I'm really thankful for my faith that brought me through that entire season, because for several years it was really hard.
I love how you refer to it as seasons. I do the same thing because I want people to know that this will pass, right? You will not be here forever.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, there were multiple times that we were just unsure, I remember the bank for, the notice on the door of the house that said, hey, you've got till this date and you've got to leave. And that was really challenging. I remember having to call my church small group and say, hey guys, this is a bunch of high schoolers. Can you help me move? Can you help me and my mom move? Because we're losing our house right now. And then fast forward to today when everybody's healthy, and we're actually just put an offer on a home on yesterday, and that's really cool. So yeah, it's definitely come full circle in a lot of ways.
Well, congratulations. I know that one of the things you were telling me right before we got on the podcast is with COVID, everybody's pivoting and growing and moving into different directions. What have you been doing with yourself during this time?
So in the marketing and business space, I feel like there's a couple different players right now, and luckily I have the opportunity to work with a lot of different companies. There are the ones that I'm just going to start off with the hardest ones, which is the ones that are just really struggling during the season, right? Like a restaurant might be somebody who's really pressed right now. Often restaurants don't have a lot of savings, so something like this is really devastating for a restaurant because they don't have cash flow and they really rely on that. So I'm not necessarily talking about the ones that are in the super hard space right now, but other ones that do have a little bit of cash margin. So some of the companies that I work with, one is a fly fishing guide I'm a partner in. And for them, we try to pivot some of our guides. So all the people that we were having trips while we were on shutdown or lockdown, whatever you want to call it, shelter in place. And we couldn't do guide trips. We tried to pivot our guides that we were paying to do other stuff. So like writing blogs or connecting sales process or some more brand marketing stuff. So we were able to pivot some of the human resources to set us up better for long term. And as far as brand marketing goes, some other things that we've worked on, I've got some companies that are doing really well right now. One of them is a window film company with like home decor additions. People are in their homes more, so they want to upgrade their home. So for them, we're scaling that up and seeing how far we can go. And then there's also the kind of middle ground where a few companies that we're working with know that eventually their doors are going to open back up, and they have the financial resources, not necessarily the human resources like with the fly fishing guide business, but they have the financial resources to build a sales funnel so that whenever people come back looking for them, they'll be ready for it.
Wow, you're busy. And I love that you're helping other people pivot, because I think it's super important that we learn to roll with things easily and not when something comes up, it just puts us dead in the water. I
remember, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, kind of going back to that first story of hope, there was a moment that I think maybe helps me in this season is that when my dad was really struggling, I was so many times that I was so frustrated with him that I wanted to go a similar direction that he was going. Like I wanted to just lean into the stuff that he was leaning into. And I thought to myself, you know what? I can't control him. I can't control a lot of things, but I can control myself. And I don't know that I quite articulated that at 17, but that's kind of what I was thinking. And I think that same principle is true today. And I think in this season right now, it would be really easy to feel a lot of fear, especially if you're a business owner or a freelancer or, in the gig economy, or you just lost your job. But this can really be an opportunity to grow. And I know for some people, that's probably an oversimplification of it, but I think like there's definitely opportunity if you can see it as an opportunity to just control yourself.
You know what, as a mindset coach, fear is the same emotion as excitement in the brain. And honestly, I've always known that. And if I lost my job, I'm like, wow, I lost my job. What exciting thing is going to happen next? And your brain gets excited, right? Doesn't know the difference. Seriously, I've heard a lot about your company, Caffeine Marketing. I want to know exactly what it is and what made you create that.
So about 4 years ago and change, my dad had passed away, unrelated to the drug stuff. He eventually got clean, and which was great, but he passed away, long story short, from a rare infection. So that happens, which is obviously super devastating. And me just saying it casually does not really put weight to it, but he passes away, and I thought, you know what, I have this marketing skill set because I was working at a nonprofit and about half my role was marketing. I can't help him as a business owner. And my grandfather, who also owns a business, is about to retire. I can't help him really either, but I can help other small business owners and entrepreneurs like them. And so that's why I decided to start Caffeine Marketing, was to help other people like them and in a way kind of honor my dad, I feel like.
I like it. I like that you started it. By the way, I was on your website earlier today and I was looking at your mission statement, and you do mention your dad and your grandfather. I thought it was a beautiful mission statement.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So can you make marketing easy for people who really just don't understand? So can you make it like the ABCs, or what is it, Marketing 101 for Dummies?
Yeah. I think my wife is always a great filter for this sort of stuff, because it's not that she's not bright. She's very bright. But she just has no interest in business. So this has worked for her. So bear with me, and hopefully don't completely tune out here. But think of it in 3 stages. The first stage is brand awareness. The second one is consideration. And then the third one is conversion. So brand awareness is the point in which you want somebody to be aware of your company or of your service, of your product, whichever, because if they're not aware of you, they'll never buy your product or service. Consideration is the point in which they're aware that you exist, but they're not sure if they want to work with you yet, whether it be not be the right time. They haven't quite internalized what problem that you solve for them. They really don't understand what's at risk if they don't work with you. All of that is in the consideration phase. And then lastly is conversion. And then that's the thing that you want them to do. You want them to buy the product. You want them to submit a form on your website. You want them to sign up for this service. You really just want to make conversion as easy as possible for them by removing all sorts of friction or barriers that get in the way of that.
By the way, that was a beautifully done in 3 steps. How simple is that?
Yeah, I think it should be really easy to understand, or else you won't apply it.
So once you know those 3 steps, how do you go about marketing?
I really would start with an audit, and I would audit your messaging and all of the things that you're doing on that brand awareness, consideration, conversion, funnel. Your messaging is going to be hard, but I would try to get as much outside feedback as possible. People maybe in a coffee shop that don't know you, people who aren't familiar with what you do, and I would have them look at your product or service, your website, your Instagram bio, any of that, to see if they actually understand what you do within 5 seconds. So someone should be able to pull up your website, and without even scrolling down, they should be able to understand who you are, what you offer, how to buy your product, and how it's going to make their life better. And so if they can immediately pick that up on your website, you're going to convert a lot more sales, have a lot more people buy your product or sign up for your service. So very tactically is I would get feedback on your messaging. And then the other one is I would lay out everything that you're doing intentionally in that marketing funnel. Just make it in 3 big buckets. The very top bucket, brand awareness, consideration, conversion, not to be redundant here. But you would put down Facebook ads. Okay, where are Facebook ads in this process? Most likely they're in the brand awareness, but they're also in the consideration phase. All right, you've got a free PDF on your website. Where does that fit in? That's probably under consideration. And so is the follow-up email sequence to that. And then conversion is your landing page, optimizing your landing page for conversions and all the tactics that you can use for pricing and pricing tiers, adding a 9 on your e-commerce, all that stuff fits within conversion, from my opinion.
I love it. It sounds so simple too. And by the way, I was taking notes. I never take notes. So it was great information. What are Caffeine Labs?
Yeah, okay. Caffeine. So let's start with this. For the last 3 years, I've been able to double my company's bottom line revenue every single year, which has been really cool. And what I decided to do is, for most of these business leaders that I work with, marketing doesn't solve all their problems. It definitely solves a top line revenue problem, but it's not as optimized as it could be. So let's say that they're working with us and they're spending $1. Let's say they hand us $1 and we get them $5 back. In reality, if they had all the other systems and processes optimized and the rest of their business optimized, then they'd be getting $10 in return because they may not have revenue leaks. Or the back-end system might actually encourage upsells, or they might be getting reviews or growing their local SEO. So there's a lot of things that go beyond marketing that I lay out in this course called Caffeine Labs. It's Business Mastery by Caffeine Labs. And it's essentially the exact blueprint that I've used to grow my company through business, leadership, and marketing.
I like that a lot. How does Caffeine Labs, how would it help me as an entrepreneur? Does it help all entrepreneurs? Do they have to be in a very specific field? Does this system work for everybody?
I would say it's probably most applicable for entrepreneurs that are doing less than $5 million a year. And what I mean is there's probably at that point, you should have all this stuff optimized already at that point. You may not, but a lot of this is dialing in yourself. So little things that you may not think of, like getting more REM sleep, how that's going to affect your bottom line, or how you can structure your nutrition in order to get another hour worth of deep work out of yourself, or how to structure your teams, or how to empower people versus delegating, and how to essentially optimize your workload mix so that you can grow your revenue. So I'd say for, a smaller entrepreneur doing less than $5 million a year, it'd probably be great.
One of the things that you touched on a few minutes ago, which is key for me as an entrepreneur, I understand the importance of handing over the areas that I am not an expert in and don't have any desire to become an expert in, and paying that money. And one of the things I ask them is kind of like what you just said. You give them $1, they give you back 5. But I always ask them, how long until you're paying for your services? Like, how long do I need to work with you, paying you at $1, $1,000, whatever it is, until I'm seeing that revenue come in and you're paying for yourself? Because in my mind, if they say, oh, that'll be 6 months for us to double that, that'll be, in my mind, that's their cutoff date. I'm all in.
Yeah, it should be.
And if I don't see that growth, then I understand that we just weren't a fit. But I also understand that I would not have even come close to whatever they're coming to had I done it on my own.
Yeah, you're right. There are a couple things that come to mind, and this is always changing. But SEO can be a really hard thing. Like, you definitely have to find somebody who knows what they're doing, but they're also affordable. And you've also got to do a lot of your own work to make it successful. We don't offer that as a service just because I really do like to see I really like to make marketing profitable for all companies that we work with, and preferably within the first 30 to 60 days. So it doesn't really fit within our business model, what we're trying to do. But SEO is still important, but I'd be really cautious of paying an agency. There's probably great SEO agencies out there, but I just wouldn't pay that money. So another one is actually social media content marketing. And this is actually fairly controversial, and some of my friends don't like this opinion that I have, but I pretty much will not, quote, sell that as a service on its own. And the reason is because it often does not pay for itself. It's important. And there is a certain point in which a solo entrepreneur or a small company where they have to have a presence on Instagram and TikTok, maybe not TikTok, but LinkedIn. But I don't know that it makes sense to hire an agency like us because their reach is not that large. And so therefore they're not going to see the return on that content marketing. And it may not ever make that return. So that's why I like to incorporate paid advertising or something like that can, significantly pay for those other services if we decide to do that.
100%. I believe that. I've lived that. I literally on my Instagram have over 40,000 followers, and you don't get paid return on that. It just keeps growing. But if I were to hire a company to be doing that for me, I know that I'm not going to see a paid return. It's just growth. So one of the things I want to talk to you about is you talk about in your courses, you talk about revenue leaks. What are some of the most common ones?
Okay, the two ones that come to mind, and I'll give you a framework to evaluate the third, or to find a third one, but HR and bookkeeping. Those are my two easiest, save thousands of dollars for small businesses. I would look into, and I think I should get sponsored for these guys. I've told so many people about them. Is Gusto, Gusto, and Bench, Bench. Bench is a bookkeeping solution, an outsourced bookkeeping solution where they do all the work for you. So it's not like Intuit or, like that, or QuickBooks is what I was thinking, owned by Intuit. And then Gusto is actually a payroll service, and they do pretty much everything for you. So all the compliance, all that jazz. So what that is going to do is going to save you from having to pay somebody in-house or pay, Bench, I'm going to make up a name here, Visa bookkeeping from doing it, because Bench is hyper optimized. They're going to give you the best price possible. And what dictates or what determines a revenue leak is you work so hard to grow your company that there's all these little small cost things that you don't need to be super cheap on. But let's say you worked really hard for that $2,000, and then all of a sudden you're throwing $20 here and $100 there every single month. That eventually adds up, and you end up losing all of that revenue that you worked so hard to find. The question that I would ask, and I would encourage people out there to write down every single expense in their business for the past 12 months, especially at least the last 2-3 months of recurring expenses, and ask yourself, does that directly help me grow my bottom line? Every single expense you have to justify, and the ones that you cannot, I would trim. And I would try to find a solution like Gusto and Bench so that you're not overpaying for something that doesn't directly grow your bottom line. Because if you're paying, not to use an agency as an example, but let's say you're paying Caffeine Marketing $5,000 and it's making you $50,000 a month. That's a great investment. So you're not trying to be cheap there. But if something is not growing your bottom line, like your type of water that you have in your fridge, something like that, those are all little small revenue leaks.
By the way, not only do I like that, it's one of my favorite things you've talked about so far. And I definitely do that. And every quarter I go over that list again to see, and I even break it down like, this is my podcast. This is what I'm spending. Is it making me that money? This is my magazine. This is what it's spending. And if I see that it's just sucking money, even though I love it, I tend to walk away from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super important. And I love that you have the security, which obviously you would, but like the security in yourself to go, hey, I'm not romantically attached to this. Like no shame if this no longer works for me, let it serve your company.
What are some of the key qualities of a great leader?
I feel like the first one is empathy. I feel like I've learned the most being under leaders that I really did not like being under for either themselves or myself. And so it was the ones that were self-sabotaging or sabotage their teams. But ultimately, I think that can all be solved if we're empathetic. An example of this is like, let's say I've got a contractor and I'm saying to the contractor, hey, come on, we're going to come into a team lunch. We're going to go out to True Food Kitchen together. And so we decide we're going to go to True Food Kitchen. For a split second, I go to myself, I bet they wonder if they're going to get paid for that hour that we're at lunch because they're an hourly contractor. Instead of going, oh, I won't worry about it. I'm like, no, like I need to be empathetic to what that person's probably thinking in that moment and go, hey, I'm just going to shoot them a text. Hey, by the way, this is like, we're going to pay for lunch and we're also going to pay like for your time. I think just those little small things build trust with people that you ultimately have their back and that you're for them. There was I was working on a project or like a project we was collaborating with some other people on. And I asked one of them, her name's Sean. I said, hey, Sean, here's my idea. I think this kind of runs within your domain for this specific project. Do you want my help with it? Or do you just, want me to stay out of your way? And she was like, I'm so thankful that you asked me that question because that's what I would want to hear. I was like, I would not want somebody dictating every little thing about this project. Like if you trust me, then let me run with it. So I felt like, Sean in that moment appreciated, but I'm definitely not perfect in that, but I do think empathy, just in those small little things and asking yourself what it's like to be on the other side of you, it's probably really helpful.
Well, this podcast is going to be great for show notes because there's a lot of golden nuggets in this. So thank you. I wanted to ask you too, because we talk about stories of hope and we grow our business through same thing, stories of hope. What are some of the lessons you've learned through adversity?
Probably the first one that comes to mind is focusing on what matters 100 years from now. That's something that I feel like has just been super true for me over the years. I don't know who to give credit to it for, but maybe it was me, who knows? And I just feel like for me, what's important 100 years from now is my faith. And it really is important to me and my relationship with God, and then also my family. And that's probably the main two, and then my friends, and then maybe legacy. But for other people, legacy might be the most important thing, and that's fine. I think it's really what matters to each person, but you have to ask yourself what matters 100 years from now. And if a client, if you apply for a job, you don't get a job. Like a great example, we put an offer on a home, like I mentioned last night. It's hopefully it's going to get accepted today. And if it doesn't, then that's okay. It doesn't matter 100 years from now. We are not going to worry about this. So I think it's just those little things that keep me personally centered.
I love that. What are some practical ways that people can grow their influence at work? Which I hope that you have this great, amazing thing, because I see people growing really big businesses, but they're not really building that influence as they go.
Yeah, I think I'm going to answer two parts of this. One is I think being an empathetic leader helps you grow your influence. I think if we're talking like the entrepreneur business owner, that's what I would say be empathetic. Obviously you're hardworking and that's why you're an entrepreneur and you've made it this far and you've grit and hard work got you to the place where you are today. So kudos, that really is important. Empathy is going to take you to that next level. But for the person who's not the business owner or who is not the number one leader, I think it's a combination of things. I think one, it's being faithful. And by being faithful, I mean just doing what you say and having integrity. So if you're going to say, hey, I'm going to run with that project, like see it from start to finish, make it great. Don't run out of steam. Let people trust you. Like I trust, Katie, Katie does a lot of work with my team. I trust Katie to be faithful, to see a project from beginning to end, and it's going to be awesome. So little stuff like that is like faithfulness, I think goes a long, long way with the people that are leading you. And then the second one I feel like is kind of a hack. I feel like it can get a lot of influence really, really quickly. So no one abuse this. But if you bring clarity into a situation where there's confusion, I think that is the easiest way to immediately be seen as the leader in the room. And it's like a secret sauce, you know, if I come into a client, and honestly, what makes caffeine marketing so special in a lot of ways is we use a thing called story brand. And so we'll come in and we'll clarify a company's messaging, and then that company will go, my goodness, I have never been able to explain what I do. And now I can finally do that because I can actually articulate what it is that we offer and how it makes people's lives better. So in that moment, I've just brought clarity into this company, and they now see me as the authority. They now see me as the guide in that scenario. So I feel like if you can apply that same principle to your workplace and go, all right, what are we struggling with as a team? Where are we not on the same page? Where do we not have the answer? And if you can bring clarity in that situation, I feel like you'll win a lot of influence.
I think that one of the important things, because I build online influencers, I build global influencers online. And when they come to me, I'll hear things like, I need more followers. I want thousands of followers. And I'll ask them, how many followers do you have? I have 1,000, or I have 50, I have 100, I have 200. What do you think an influencer should look like as far as what does that mean? Because what I tell them is if you have 50 people, 20 people, you're an influencer to 20 people or 50 people. So your message should be what it is, even if it's thousands of people. It's really shouldn't be any different because there's more people in the group, right?
In a lot of ways, I agree. It's possible that you have multiple different quote psychographics. Let's say you're at your stage with 40, 50,000. I bet there's different types of people that listen to you. You know, there could be like a mom entrepreneur. There could be a female executive. There could be a male executive. Like you might have a gamut of different people, and it might be important to talk to them. But I feel like your message or your truth is probably still applicable to all of those people, and that's probably what's attracted them to you in the first place. We're not quote influencers. I think we've got like, I don't know, a couple thousand people that follow us on Instagram. And we have a private account for our family one. And it is ridiculous. Like sometimes we'll do an Instagram story as a family. And then the next thing I know, I've got somebody at work that's like, oh my gosh, like we love that. Can you please do more of that? And I'm like, really? Like that was like weird to us, like a little quote motivational thing that we did. I thought that was a little hokey, but you really liked it. And they're like, my gosh, it was really helpful. I just needed that. So I think it's those little small things that matter.
I love that. Take care of the customers, client base that you already have before worrying about bringing in the masses. Think of them as your beta group, like they're testing out, they're giving you feedback, they're very intimate. And so just perfect that before you start going out there and wanting thousands. What is the easiest way to grow someone's company for you?
It is to change their narrative and their messaging from making them the hero of their own messaging to making them the guide. Because most customers or clients, when they wake up, they're the hero of their own story and they're not looking for another hero. And by a hero, I mean somebody who talks about how awesome they are, goes on and on about their accomplishments and stuff like that, or fights to get somebody's attention. Hey, we're so amazing, you should pick us. I really do think if you can position yourself as the guide in your marketing messaging, you're going to be really successful because everybody's looking for the Haymitch in the Hunger Games or the Yoda in Star Wars. They're looking for, Luke Skywalker, somebody that's going to help them win the day of their own story. And so if we can come along people as a guide, I feel like, honestly, it's probably a little bit more humble because it's not all about us. And then also I feel like people are going to really want to buy your product or service at that point.
Evan, that was probably the best piece of advice I've had anyone ever give here on the podcast. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, I'm so flattered. Thanks.
No, it really is. Like I am 100% about connections, really making people matter, really listening. And to me, that was probably the best piece of advice we've ever had on the show.
Flattered. Thanks.
So how can people connect with you if they want to get more of this amazing goodness?
You can go to evanknox.com if you just want to connect with me, or if you are in the business space or have some sort of marketing influence at work, you can go to caffeine.marketing, and no.com, just caffeine.marketing. And I've also got a free guide on how to build a winning sales funnel. So if you want like a Lego kit for how to build a sales funnel, it's on my website.
Well, I'm definitely going to be grabbing that, even though I pass that on to the geniuses in my, I'm not a genius at building funnels, but I would definitely love to have a better understanding of how they work.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
Thank you so much, Evan, for being on the show. You were actually really, really incredible. And I was so excited to have you on the show because I was reading your website, and you have to visit his website. It is really full of a lot of information, and he definitely walks the walk. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.